Maverick News. The world is watching. In a universe full of ideas, we draw lightness from the dark to a place where opposites attract. Right meets left, positive touches negative, sparking an explosion of truth. Because politics makes strange bedfellows.
Explain real quick to our viewers, who are the Husseinites? We talk about the Banderites a lot, but who are the Husseinites?
Oh my gosh. How long of a show are you?
Hey, we got all the time in the world. In fact, I'm going to show people. I have a clip that might save you some explaining, actually. When we talk about Husseinites, we're talking about the ideological devotees of the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Haj Amin Al-Husseini. And his followers are called the Husseinites.
Let's go into al-Husseini.
Yeah, let's dive in. What a lot of people don't know, of course, they know about the Ukrainian Nazis, right, who allied with Hitler during World War II. But what a lot of Western folks don't know is that during World War II, the Palestinians, if you can call them that, and much of the Arab countries allied themselves also with Nazi Germany for the same reasons that the Banderites did in Ukraine. They wanted two things. A, they wanted an independent state of their own, Palestine, that was Juden-free. No Jews. They wanted to run all the Jews out of the Holy Land. Number two, they wanted to kill Jews. They had that in common with Nazi Germany. There was a meeting of the minds between Hitler and the Grand Mufti. And since documentaries are hard to come by, when you're researching this and you look into who was the Grand Mufti and why was he allied with Nazi Germany, you're not going to find hardly any documentaries in the English language. But the best one that I've found was made several years ago by German TV, Arte TV. And of course, leave it to the Germans, right, to be able to tell this story like no one else. They talked to al-Husseini's daughter and one of his sons, and also talked to some of the original fighters, both Jewish and Arab, from the 1948 war. So this was before they passed away. This was several years ago. It's a classic. It's called The Turban and the Swastika. And if you're curious about who Haj Amin Al-Husseini was, he was an enthusiastic Nazi. We're going to show you a little clip of that film right now.
Der Führer empfing den Großmufti von Jerusalem, einen der einflussreichsten Männer des arabischen Nationalismus. Der Großmufti ist das religiöse Oberhaupt der Araber in Palästina und gleichzeitig deren oberster Richter und Finanzverwalter. Wegen seiner nationalen Haltung verfolgten ihn die Engländer erbittert und setzten auf seinen Kopf einen Preis von 25.000 Pfund aus. Auf abenteuerlichen Wegen gelangt er über Italien nach Deutschland.
Der Begriff der Mufti, man nannte seinen Namen kaum, es war immer der Mufti, das wäre der Feind überhaupt.
Nannte man den Namen Haj Amin Al-Husseini, das Schwert des Islam, dann erbebte das Land, denn er erfreute sich eines sehr guten Rufes.
Jedes jüdische Kind, wenn es den Namen Mufti hörte, dachte an Hass, Zerstörung, Tod, Mord. Ich sah ihn aus der Ferne in der Moschee. Er hetzte auf und sprach gegen die Juden. Er war ein besonderer Typ. Er war ein Dschinji, ein Rotschopf. Rote Wimpern, rote Lippen, alles. Und er hatte ein großes Charisma.
In den arabischen Vierteln von Jerusalem scheint Hitler willkommen. In diesen Tagen sind der Führerkult und Judenhass der Deutschen dem arabischen Denken nicht fremd. Hitlers Name hat hier einen guten Klang. Auch Husseini verliert keine Zeit, dem neuen Deutschland seine Ergebenheit zu versichern. Ende März 1933 kabelt der deutsche Konsul nach Berlin. Mufti machte mir heute eingehende Ausführungen, dass Mohammedaner neues Regime begrüßen. Jüdischer Einfluss auf Wirtschaft und Politik sei schädlich und zu bekämpfen. Einen Monat später wird Husseini konkreter. Er wünscht, dass die deutschen Juden nicht nach Palästina geschickt werden. Intensiv bemüht sich der Großmufti um Kontakt und ein dauerhaftes Bündnis mit den Nazis.
Ein Sprichwort besagt, der Feind meines Feindes ist mein Freund. Das war der Grund, warum Haj Amin Al-Husseini zur damaligen Zeit sich gezwungen sah, Verbindung zu den Deutschen aufzunehmen.
Die Nazis schauen sich zwar um im Nahen Osten, aber vorerst nur als Touristen, wie Propagandachef Goebbels in Ägypten. Sie sympathisieren durchaus mit den Arabern und der Politik Husseinis, aber sie mischen sich nicht offen ein. Das Mittelmeer ist italienisches Interessengebiet. Nur heimlich suchen sie Kontakt zum Großmufti, wie 1937 Adolf Eichmann. Der SS-Mann wird von den Briten allerdings nicht ins Land gelassen. Der Mufti muss sich gedulden, aber die SS hält heimlich Kontakte und man unterstützt ihn mit Geld. Geld auch für den großen Aufstand. Seit April 1936 ist Palästina in Aufruhr. Die Araber erheben sich gegen die Briten und die Einwanderung der Juden. Aufgerufen zum gewaltsamen Aufstand hat er, der Großmufti.
Er war derjenige, der damals die Richtung bestimmte und leitete. Er hat feurige Reden gehalten, um die Schlafenden zu wecken und zu ihnen zu sprechen, damit sie sich erheben. Denn die Al-Aqsa-Moschee sei in Gefahr, die heiligen Stätten seien in Gefahr. Das stimmt, denn damals waren die heiligen Stätten wirklich sehr gefährdet und den Engländern war das gleichgültig.
Die Hetze, die arabische Propaganda nahm von Tag zu Tag zu. Das Leben in Jerusalem und nicht nur in Jerusalem wurde sehr schwer.
In Jerusalem und in anderen alten Städten fliehen die Juden aus ihren Quartieren, um sich in Sicherheit zu bringen. Eine jahrhundertealte Nachbarschaft ist für immer zerstört. Hart und ohne Kompromisse gehen die Briten gegen die Aufständischen vor. Von Beirut aus dirigiert er unbehelligt den Aufstand in seiner Heimat weiter. Ende 1940 greifen italienische Bomber die britischen Stellungen in Tel Aviv, Jaffa und vor allem den Hafen von Haifa an, wo die große Ölpipeline aus dem Irak endet. Auch deutsche Flieger sind beteiligt. Hitlers Krieg hat Palästina erreicht. Der Mufti hat nichts gegen die Bomben auf seiner Heimat. Schon bald wird er den Deutschen selbst vorschlagen, auch Jerusalem zu bombardieren. Husseini ist seit Kriegsbeginn im Irak. Aus Bagdad bietet er im Januar 1941 Hitler seine direkte Hilfe im Krieg an.
Exzellenz, die wärmste Sympathie der arabischen Völker für Deutschland ist eine feststehende Sache. Wenn die arabischen Völker von gewissen materiellen Hemmungen befreit sind, werden sie überall bereit sein, gegen den gemeinsamen Feind zu handeln und sich mit Begeisterung erheben, um ihren Anteil an der Niederlage der englisch-jüdischen Koalition durchzuführen. Großmufti von Palästina, Haj Amin Al-Husseini.
So that gives you a little bit of an idea about the Grand Mufti. And I'm sure watching that, you see a lot of parallels to how Hamas conducts their operations today. Their leaders are well-funded, well-financed, and live in other countries far, far, far away from Gaza. And they really don't give a shit if Israel bombs the hell out of Gaza. They don't care about the civilians in Gaza. In fact, they use them as fundraising tools for their jihad. Your thoughts?
Well, they're not just fundraising. It's part of their political strategy.
Right.
They've created this cult of martyrdom, and they have willing and unwilling human shields. People are in an information bubble, and when they see the videos of these people trying to escape the hospitals and a sniper is shooting at them, they just assume it's the Israelis. But there's also videos that my side will see of the people saying that it's Hamas who was shooting at them.
We've seen videos of Hamas shooting at them when the people come to get food, to get humanitarian aid.
They're not even hiding as snipers anymore. They're just straight up doing it.
Yep.
And hopefully that causes the people in especially Rafah to speak up more to the press, so that people start listening to them. I don't know if you heard about all of the clan leaders in Rafah publishing a letter telling the world that this teenager that everybody's talking about that got killed, and they're, everybody's acting like the Israelis did it. They said it's Hamas who did it. Mm-hmm. And that they have been trying to tell the world for years, to bring awareness for years about Hamas killing civilians, but nobody's listening to them.
That's right.
So
who's really committing genocide?
Right.
Is it Hamas? Is it Israel? Who's really responsible?
Every time I try to talk to people about this, like, oh, look at you, you're defending genocide. No, I'm not, because I have a lot of sympathy for the Palestinian people, and I think they're being victimized by their own supposed
leaders.
Government.
Yeah.
And I want the international community to help those people get to safe places, to secure these safe routes, get the people out of the hospitals. Where's the Red Cross? Where's
UNRWA?
Where are all these people? Instead of doing what they're supposed to be doing with the green corridors and the green zones and the all of that stuff. Whenever Israel says we need to bomb this block, and the international community needs to help these people get out, instead of doing that, they start calling for a ceasefire. A ceasefire to send humanitarian aid in, to do what? To feed the people while they wait to get killed? And you want to call me the one who's calling for their deaths when these people are actually defending the use of human shields?
And I know, because we've talked about it privately, and I kind of wanted to dig into it here. As a student of history, we are able to understand the influence of Nazi ideology in the Palestinian liberation movement and throughout much of Arabia even today. And one of the reasons for that, and people, of course, attack me for saying it, but it's just historical fact. After World War II, Germany was denazified, right? They made Nazi propaganda illegal. You couldn't have a copy of Mein Kampf in your home. You couldn't have a swastika flag. You couldn't display any of the symbols of the Nazi regime. So Germany was, in fact, denazified, but not the case in the Middle East. They never outlawed Mein Kampf there. It's still a bestseller. It's like number 6 bestseller in Palestine to this day. They still look upon Hitler, the Nazis, and the Grand Mufti as heroes of their liberation. And they still align with those views, and they make no apologies about it. They're like, yeah, we like Hitler. period. And that has not changed.
They have never been held accountable for ethnic cleansing their own countries.
Exactly right.
Nobody even asked, well, how did Jordan become Judean free? Where are the Jewish Palestinians, the supposed Jewish Palestinians?
How about Iraq? As we just saw in, the Farhud of 1941, when the Jews were ethnically cleansed and cleansed again from Iraq, from Kuwait, from almost every Arab country in the region. Hundreds of thousands were driven out. Or killed.
I'm trying not to get emotional, but
I understand.
It's like, who's actually, both sides accuse the other of ethnic cleansing, but who has actually accomplished that?
The numbers speak for themselves.
How?
Look up the Jewish population in an Arab country today. Good luck finding them.
And there's over 2 million Arabs in
Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. I mean, in 1948, when Israel became a nation state, there were about 160,000 Arabs living in Israel who became citizens. And that number has grown, to about 2 million today. And they have full citizenship rights. That's one of the lies that is told in Hamas propaganda, is that Arab Israelis don't have any rights in Israel. But that's not true. They have voting rights. They have full citizenship. They serve in the Knesset. They serve on the bench, on the Supreme Court.
Every time somebody talks about a law that supposedly discriminates against an Israeli Arab, the law also applies to Jews. Like nobody is allowed to buy property, in certain areas. Nobody is. The Arabs can't, the Jews can't either. So that's just one example. The only difference in laws that I see that is applied differently, I've only found like 2. And the first one is that Arabs are excused from compulsory service. Okay, so they only join the IDF if they want to. Okay, so they're excused from that. And the other one is Arabs are not allowed to be evicted from their homes as long as they pay their rent. Okay, so all of these evictions that you're seeing in Jerusalem, they're like, stealing people's houses or whatever. These are people who haven't paid their rent.
Just like here, if you don't pay your rent, out you go.
Exactly. But here's the thing: they can move into a house without permission, a house that somebody else owns, like the Jews that got expelled. It's the old Jewish quarter. This is the area they're talking about that Jordan had purged the Jews of in 1948. So these are Jewish homes that had been abandoned because they were, thrown out. And these Palestinians moved in to these homes that they didn't own. And Israel made a law, well, we're not going to throw them out, when they annexed it. We're not going to throw them out as long as they pay their rent, as long as they pay the owner's rent. So,
So you're saying that the stolen land narrative is inverted, just like the genocide narrative? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Oh, but try saying that on Twitter. Holy shit. They've got an army of Twitter trolls who'll come after you. I'll tell you a story.
I get it, because I fell for it one time too.
Me too. Right after October 7th, I started writing about the history. because I'm a historian. I didn't really have a dog in the fight. I wasn't on either side. I'm just telling you guys about the history of al-Husseini, the Grand Mufti, the continuing influence of Nazism in the Palestinian liberation movement. And I was trying to tell people that, yes, they were allied with the Nazis in World War II. I got attacked for it. I had people tell me, Lori, you don't know anything. I'm like, no, actually, they did. And I posted this picture, right, on Twitter. Now that's a group of Palestinian soldiers in World War II flying their Palestine flag with the swastika on it. They were loud and proud, and they were very enthusiastic Nazis. Now, there is a narrative that their defenders like to say. When they talk about the Grand Mufti, they say, oh, he was just against the British, right? It was a marriage of convenience with the Nazis, they say. He wasn't really a Nazi. He was just against the British.
They say about Bandera. They say that about Bandera. Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly. Would you like to address that he was only anti-British narrative?
I just don't even understand how they can say that, though.
Me neither. Me neither, because as you can see in that documentary, and that was only like the early years. First of all, he was early on board. As soon as the Nazis came to power in 1933, the Grand Mufti forged that alliance right away. Right away.
But they weren't even against the British. See, that's the thing that's kind of mind-blowing to me.
Right.
They weren't against the British. So when they did the what's called the Arab strike, before the Arab uprising, they all went on strike.
This was protest. Like 1935, 36, thereabouts.
Yeah, I think so. I brought a notebook, but I knew that I wasn't going to remember dates.
That's okay.
But
I think
anyway,
the Arab revolt started in 36.
After you post this, I'm going to post a thread full of sources and links so that people can look at it.
Great.
Yeah, because there's no way I'm going to remember exact dates, etc. right now. Where was I?
We were talking about the strikes.
They were protesting about the immigration, and what they were demanding from the British was stop Jewish immigration, don't allow the Jews to own any land, and yeah.
Even though I should point out that
make Jews into second-class citizens, and the British said okay. So that ended.
And it doomed so many European Jews to their deaths in concentration camps because they could not leave Europe and come to Palestine.
Yeah. There's so much more to this, Like, people want to say, okay, well, won't the Jews just be happy of being in an Arab country, being ruled by Arabs? Why couldn't they, accept that instead of demanding a Jewish state? But here's something that has been memory hold, and it's a very frustrating thing. The partition that happened in 1948 was the second partition.
True.
So the mandate of Palestine used to include what we now know as Jordan.
That's right.
So they gave right away, they partitioned the country and gave 80% that was supposed to be the Arab state. And then this 20% was going to go to be the Jewish state. And of course, the Jews noticed that Jordan became Judean-free. They immediately kicked all the Jews out of the country. So what do you think they're going to feel like when the British say, we're just clarifying that the Balfour Declaration didn't mean that it was going to be a Jewish state. It's still going to be an Arab state with an Arab majority, and the Jews will be allowed to be there, I guess. And then they turn around and say, No more Jewish immigration. And they start sending the Jews to detention centers in Cyprus. So they feel like they're going from one concentration camp to another concentration camp. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, all these Jews that were coming in to try to escape the Holocaust, they were not actually going to Palestine. They were getting sent to detention centers in Cyprus. The Jews that were there were Ottoman Jews. So why wouldn't they insist on having a Jewish state when they know it's the only way that they're going to survive? These Ottoman Jews, who, before even World War I started, were getting purged by Arab nationalists. The military governor of Syria, he spent 3 to 5 years purging the Sanjak of Jerusalem of Jews, putting them on ships and sending them to Egypt, and confiscating their homes and their assets while he did it. Okay, so what they accused the Jews of doing, the Arabs actually did it to the Jews years before.
That's a great point.
So after the Brits came, those Ottoman Jews that were in Egypt, then that's when they went back. So Ben Gurion, he was one such Jew. He was an Ottoman Jew. He came to the Ottoman Empire after the Odessa massacre started. He became a subject of the Ottoman Empire. He fought in the Ottoman army. And he got expelled from the country in one of those purges. So, I mean, I would be desperate for a Jewish state.
And there were efforts made, to establish Jewish autonomous zones, say in Russia under Stalin in the Soviet Union. We did a whole show about it. These attempts to establish safe zones, right, to prevent more pogroms in Crimea. Another was out in Siberia. And of course, those plans didn't work. So no matter what they tried, they had no safe place to go in Europe.
Yeah, well, they decided against Crimea. There is the Jewish Autonomous Oblast in Russia that still exists today.
True. Still there.
And there used to be a lot of Jews there, but then they ended up going to Israel at a certain point because of the American effort. Now that's another story.
And that was many, many, many years later. But we're still talking about the 1920s and the 1930s. And we were talking about the Mufti and his relationship with the British, which I want to dig into a little bit more because it's so important. It's important to remember that the British created the Grand Mufti. They're the ones who literally gave him his power and his name, his honorary title of the Grand Mufti. Also, they're the ones who saved his fanny. After the Arab revolt, he was wanted and then he escaped dressed as a woman. He was a master of disguise. He was always on the run. He ended up in Lebanon, I think in 1937, and eventually made his way to Iraq, where he instigated a jihad, an uprising, an effort to try and win Iraq as Nazi German territory. That failed, and the British put it down. But throughout his entire life, including after World War II, the Grand Mufti was actually protected by the British. He was a wanted war criminal. They tried to prosecute him at Nuremberg, but they couldn't catch him. He escaped to France. And he was protected by British MI6. Later, many, many years later, when we got the Nazi War Crimes Disclosure Act passed, we had confirmation at last, literally in a British intelligence document, that called him Agent Number 1. He was literally a British asset, an MI6 asset. So he wasn't really fighting the British. That's a false narrative. It was the British who saved his ass from being prosecuted and locked up for the rest of his life at Nuremberg, which is what should have happened.
So, the Nebi Musa massacre, I forget what year it was, 1920...
23?
23, I think, yeah.
Around there?
I think it was 23.
He instigated that, didn't he?
Yes, he instigated that. And then, the local government said, you're a criminal. And he fled the country for a bit. Mm-hmm. I think he went to Germany, to Munich. But then
he had lots of friends there.
The British guy that was in charge, I forget the name, the title of his role, but he was basically, the British representative that ran the whole mandate or whatever, forgave him, pardoned him, and made him Grand Mufti. That's how he became the Grand Mufti.
Exactly right.
Okay. And here's a couple of interesting things. When he ran away to Egypt to escape the Nuremberg trials and all, Egypt was occupied by the Brits. Why did they let him stay there? And here's another interesting thing. When Egypt invaded Gaza in 1948 to challenge Jordan's leadership of the Arab state, the Grand Mufti was like the lead of the government there, the all-Palestine government. I think I've lost my voice here.
Well, another thing that's interesting about Egypt, after the war, a lot of Nazi war criminals, as we know, escaped to places like Canada. Some ended up in the United States, and some went to Britain. Others ended up in South America, and Brazil, and Argentina. But what a lot of people don't know is that a ton of those German Nazis ended up taking refuge in Egypt, in Syria, in Lebanon, and other countries. Some of them literally converted to Islam, changed their names to Islamic names as a way of cloaking their identity to keep them safe from Nazi hunters and prosecutors. And the Grand Mufti himself had 12 passports under 12 different names.
One of those Nazis ended up being an advisor to Nasser.
Oh, yeah. Nasser's army and his military intelligence was swimming with former Nazis, many of them Arab collaborators. Mm-hmm. But there were Germans, too. And what's interesting, too, as I was going through these declassified documents recently under the Nazi War Crimes Disclosure Act, really looking at the Arab collaborators, it was fascinating to me how a lot of the documents, especially the German ones, referred to the Palestinians who were on their side fighting as honorary Aryans. And in fact, Hitler was quite infatuated with Islam. He had a lot of respect for the Arabs, even though he, didn't really consider them to be Aryans, but he made them honorary Aryans. And he was really fascinated by the Grand Mufti because unlike your average Arab who has, dark brown skin and brown eyes, the Mufti looked white. He had red hair. He had blue eyes, striking blue eyes, they say, and was, as you can see in the photographs of him, very light-skinned. So I have another clip that I want to play you. This gets into the World War II years and the strongest years of the Arab and Nazi alliance. And in this clip, they actually talk about how Hitler literally had a whole DNA, they didn't have DNA, but he did this whole genealogical study of the Grand Mufti to see if it was okay to ally himself with someone who wasn't an Aryan. And the pretzel knots that Hitler twisted himself into to justify an alliance with an Arab and how he came up with this honorary Aryan business. It's fascinating. Take a look at this.
In der Reichshauptstadt wird schon für die Siegesparade geübt. Die Nazi-Metropole ist auch das Ziel des Mufti. Nach abenteuerlicher Flucht hat er sich bis nach Berlin durchgeschlagen. So nahe war er dem Führer noch nie.
Wir dachten immer, dass er die rechte Hand Hitlers sein wird. Darüber wurde nicht gesprochen. Aber wir wussten, dass er schließlich nach Deutschland gehen würde.
Husseini verspricht Hitler erneut die Gefolgschaft der Araber und wirbt für seine Pläne in Mittelost. Hitler macht nur mündliche Zusagen. Später, bei seinen berühmten Tischgesprächen, zeigt sich der Führer beeindruckt von dem eminent schlauen Fuchs. Trotz seines Spitzmausgesichtes mache dieser den Eindruck eines Mannes, unter dessen Vorfahren mehr als ein Arier gewesen sei.
Haj Amin al-Husseini glaubte, wenn Deutschland den Krieg gewinnen würde, könnte ihm das möglicherweise helfen, den Arabern ihre Unabhängigkeit und Einheit zu geben.
Husseini trifft auf ein Land, das sich im Siegestaumel befindet und vor Kraft und Selbstbewusstsein strotzt. Beeindruckt erlebt er im Reichstag die deutsche Kriegserklärung gegen die USA. Und was er hört, ist ihm vertraut.
Wir wissen, welche Kraft hinter Roosevelt steht. Es ist der ewige Jude, der seine Zeit als gekommen erachtet, um das auch an uns zu vollstrecken, dass wir in Sowjetrussland alle schaudern, sehen und erleben mussten. Wir haben das jüdische Paradies auf Erden nunmehr kennengelernt. Wir aber wissen, dass es die Absicht der Juden und ihres Franklin Roosevelt ist, einen Staat nach dem anderen allein zu vernichten.
Der Großmufti ist sicher, auf die richtige Karte gesetzt zu haben. Die Chancen, jetzt im Zeichen des Hakenkreuzes nach Jerusalem zurückzukehren, stehen gut. In Nordafrika eilt General Rommel von Sieg zu Sieg. Zeit, die eigenen Pläne wieder ins Spiel zu bringen. Im April 1942 schreibt er an Außenminister Ribbentrop:
Herr Reichsminister, wir haben die Bereitschaft des arabischen Volkes am Kampf gegen die gemeinsamen Feinde bis zum Endsieg erklärt. Wir bitten nun, den unter britischer Unterdrückung leidenden arabischen Ländern in ihrem Kampf für die Befreiung jede denkbare Unterstützung zu gewähren, die Souveränität und Unabhängigkeit anzuerkennen und ihrer Vereinigung sowie der Beseitigung der jüdisch-nationalen Heimstätte in Palästina zuzustimmen. Amin al-Husseini.
In den Straßen von Jerusalem riefen sie „Vorwärts Rommel!", in der Hoffnung auf jedweden deutschen Sieg gegen die 8. Armee der Briten unter der Führung von General Montgomery. Man klatschte für die deutsche Armee, als würde sie von einem arabischen Befehlshaber geführt.
Es herrschte eine furchtbare Panik. Ich kam von der Armee zum Urlaub in den Kibbuz. Alle liefen auf mich zu, insbesondere die Genossinnen. Kommen Sie oder kommen Sie nicht? Und ich erzählte ihnen, dass sie nicht kommen werden. Wir werden das nicht zulassen. Aber wir glaubten nicht, dass wir sie aufhalten könnten. Die Angst war groß. Und die Araber hier wetzten schon die Messer, um die jüdische Bevölkerung mit Hilfe der Deutschen, mit Hilfe der Nazis zu töten. Die Panik war furchtbar.
Der Hass gegen die Engländer und die Juden erreichte seinen Höhepunkt. Das Maß war voll und am Überlaufen. Insbesondere nachdem sie gesehen hatten, wie die Zionisten aufschreckten nach dem deutschen Sieg in Nordafrika.
Von Berlin aus zieht er die Fäden des Widerstandes in Mittelost. Im deutschen Radio propagiert er den Heiligen Krieg gegen die Juden. Bei den nicht-arabischen Muslimen wirbt er ebenfalls unermüdlich für das Regime, damit auch Inder, Turkestaner, Kaukasier oder Krimtataren für den Krieg der Deutschen antreten. Sein Wort gewinnt in der Reichshauptstadt immer mehr an Gewicht. Großzügig unterstützt das Regime den Mufti. Villen, Ferienresidenzen, Dienstbüros sowie beträchtliche Monatszahlungen. Jede Dienstleistung lässt er sich fürstlich vom Außenministerium und der SS entlohnen. Ein dichtes Band von Verbindungen und enge Freundschaften zu NS-Führern verschaffen ihm den nötigen Spielraum, seine Ambitionen konsequent zu verfolgen. Der Großmufti lebt in einem goldenen Exil.
Die Verbindung zu ihm war schwierig. Briefe, die uns von Reisenden überbracht wurden, waren eine Seltenheit. Sie hörten seine Stimme im Radio oder es wurde dort berichtet, dass der Mufti noch in Berlin sei. In dieser Zeit erfuhr niemand etwas über sein Schicksal.
Sentimentalitäten sind dem umtriebigen Araberführer fremd. Obwohl seine Familie in Jerusalem lebt, schlägt er seit 1943 wiederholt vor, die heilige Stadt oder Tel Aviv zu bombardieren, weil dort die Zionisten tagen oder eben nur der propagandistischen Wirkung wegen. Zügellos auch die Predigten, die Husseini in der einzigen Berliner Moschee hält. Geschickt mischt er religiösen und rassistischen Judenhass, bemüht seine Religion für seine Politik. Nicht alle sind erfreut über seine Radikalität. Doch die meisten deutschen Muslime, die ihrem Glauben ohne Behinderung nachgehen können, sympathisieren mit den Nazis und den Ansichten des Mufti.
And they still do. You know, people say, well, Lori, I don't get it. What is this, this Arab collaboration with the Nazis all those years ago have anything to do with what's happening in the Palestinian liberation movement today? What do you think? How do you think they tie together, Naomi?
Well, when first I want to apologize for being so tired.
It's okay. It's 5 o'clock in the freaking morning over there.
I'm usually a little bit more energetic.
Have you had your morning coffee yet?
I've been up all night.
Oh my!
Actually, I haven't slept at all, so I'm kind of exhausted, and I apologize for being functioning at half speed here. I'm trying to get better here.
Okay, we appreciate you doing this.
We'll do a show at a different time, like you suggested earlier.
Yeah, we'll try to catch you earlier in the day next time.
Pre-record or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, where was I now? Get my fighting game on here.
How does the Mufti still influence the Middle East is the question.
Okay. When he went to Egypt, did you know that the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood was one of his students?
That's right. Yes, also an enthusiastic supporter of Hitler and a Nazi collaborator.
Okay. So the Muslim Brotherhood is actually based on Husseinism.
Correct.
His ideology. They're a bunch of freaking Nazis, and Hamas is
born of the Muslim Brotherhood.
The Muslim Brotherhood. So this is just, like if you maybe if listeners can understand it.
Uh-oh, we're losing your audio. We're losing your audio. You're kind of breaking up a little bit. Could you repeat that, what you just said?
If you think about if the Nazis never went away and were allowed to continue, with their movement, what would that look like today? Well, the Arab Nazis were allowed to continue through the Muslim Brotherhood.
Right.
And that's what it is. So Islamic Jihadism is Arab Nazism. Anti-Zionism is Arab Nazism.
Right.
So they've been just perpetuating this, and it's all through the Palestinian liberation movement.
Mm-hmm. I call it Islamo-Nazism. Some call it Islamofascism. And
I don't know what to call it. I don't know what to call it because it's like, look, one of my friends told me here just the other day, it takes 40 years, and it's been said before, it takes 40 years to indoctrinate a society with certain ideas.
Couple of generations.
They've had more than 40 years. So how do you
denazify?
How do you denazify people in just a few hours or in a few weeks? What took several generations? This anti-Zionist concept, and help them understand that anti-Zionism is Nazism.
Precisely. And that is the challenge that Israel faces. We've heard...
It's not just criticism of the Israeli state. The narratives built around it, I mean, it's anti-Semitic because it makes you feel murderous toward the Jews.
Right. It's the same big lie that the Nazis told back during World War II and prior to the war. They said that the Jews control Russia, they control the Soviets, they control the Bolsheviks, they control Britain, they control Roosevelt, as you just saw in that clip. They run the United States.
They're
trying to kill you.
They're trying to replace you.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing.
Right. And it's the same rhetoric we hear now.
Mm-hmm. Except, in Eastern Europe, it was the Holodomor.
Mm-hmm.
In the Middle East, it's the Nakba.
Bingo. You just connected those dots perfectly. Perfectly. And, people say, well, surely they're not Nazis now, but actually, I'm going to show you a quick video. This comes out of Gaza City, folks. It's a couple of years old, not that old. They actually have a line of clothing stores, believe it or not, in Gaza that are so popular. They have two of them. There's Hitler 1 and Hitler 2. And it's literally where you go to buy your scarves, your keffiyehs, your cool battlefield clothing if you're a trendy young man involved in the resistance. I don't want you to think I'm making this up, folks, so I'll show you. Take a look for you.
اسم المحل هتلر، وانا بحبه يعني من كتر ما هو كان اكثر واحد معادي لليهود، لانه ظلمونا ويعني اخذوا حقنا، كل حقنا اخذوه في البلد، يعني ما خلوناش اشي. يعني احنا الحين بس نروح نموت احسن، احنا عايشين من قله الموت. وعجبني كمان يعني اللبس، هو احلى حاجه فيه اللبس، والاسم يعني تبعه روعه. لا مكشف.
أنا والله كنت شايف الإعلان هذا على الفيسبوك، أجيت حبيت أشوف المحل لأنه السكينة والكوفية والهذا صار رمز من رموز انتفاضة الأقصى، وحبيت يعني أجي على المحل وأشتري منه، عجبتني يعني الفكرة إنه قسم مساندة مع أهلنا بالقدس والضفة يعني وعجبتني يعني الفكرة كلها.
أنا مارق بدي أشتري أواعي، فلفت انتباهي المحل انه بيعبر عن رمز الانتفاضه في الضفه، ويعني هذه الشغلات مسانده لاهلنا في الضفه، قصه السكين والكوفيه واللتمه، حاجات حلوه تلفت الانتباه، ويعني اشي حلو ومميز كمان، حاجات حلوه كتير.
Fascinating and shocking to Western audiences who didn't know about that place. Update. I understand that in the last few weeks, the IDF bombed that place into rubble. Hitler 2 no longer exists. I don't know what happened to Hitler 1, if that store is still standing or still open. But Naomi, I have to ask you, because you're Jewish, how does it make you feel when you see here in America and around the world these huge protests with all of these kind of woke liberal white kids wearing the keffiyeh, chanting Free Palestine and from the river to the sea? What impact does that have on you?
Well, I mean, I think it makes me think that the Holocaust could happen again. When I was watching that video, I was just thinking about how when I am able to convince people that these people are Nazis, or that, they want to kill all the Jews, the response is, well, what do you expect? Look what the Jews did to them. Of course they feel like that. So, I mean, do we have to guess about what position those people would have taken in Lviv? And look at how they're behaving. There's this college professor who I used to talk to because he was, seemed to be pro-Russia, was against the Ukrainian Euromaidan and all this kind of stuff, but then he went in a weird direction with Israel, and now he wants Iran to nuke, literally, like calling for Iran to nuke Israel. And I don't know, I just want to cry sometimes.
I can only imagine.
Oh, he said, oh, come on, you're just paranoid. The Palestinians don't have the power to invoke a Holocaust against the Jews. But look at how people are reacting to October 7th.
Seems there's a lot of cheering for it out there. No?
Yeah. If they can kill 1,000 civilian Israelis in one day, and the rest of the world has done absolutely nothing about it, no, please don't tell me that they don't have the power to invoke another Holocaust.
Yeah.
They're already doing it. Where is the international court case
against Hamas?
Hamas. Yeah, against Hamas.
Hello.
For what they did on October 7th.
That's right. That's right. There should have been, on October the 8th, a demand from all civilized nations to pressure Qatar and other countries where the Hamas leaders are hiding to turn them over to The Hague.
I know that since then, people, the As a Jews have been, putting down these cover stories and convinced a lot of people that, oh, they didn't kill all those people. They did it by accident. Most of them were killed by the IDF. But before they even came up with those stories, before they even came up with these stories, people were actually justifying the murder of civilians.
Even, get this, yesterday.
I was on Twitter. Well, I was on Twitter, and these people who have been following me for years were celebrating this, and I was like, "What the fuck is wrong with all y'all?" I'm sorry. I hope I don't get you buzzed for this.
Too.
And I'm like, they killed innocent people, and they're like, "There's no such thing as an innocent Zionist."
Yes.
And I'm like, I'm a Zionist. Does that mean that people can just come up to me and kill me? Well, if you're a Zionist.
Yeah.
Blew my freaking mind. Blew my freaking mind. So please do not tell me that they do not have the power to do something like that.
And people
So I'm just waiting.
Wonder.
I'm just waiting to see how long it's going to take for there to be a massacre in New York City. You know that New York City is vulnerable, the Bronx, vulnerable to this.
Yes.
I'm waiting for it to happen there. Not eager, but that's where I'm expecting it to happen. And I wonder how the
or
United
London,
States is going to act to it.
or Paris.
People act like, oh, but we have laws that will protect people from stuff like that. The
or
law
Toronto,
is
or
not,
Montreal.
the law is not going to stop people from doing stuff like that because they believe that they need to stop the supposed genocide against the Palestinian people by any means necessary. And by any means necessary includes the mass murder of civilians. So that's what I think. That's what I think about that. And before the October 7th happened, I was a two-sider. I'm for the Palestinians.
Yep.
I'm for the Israelis too. They both deserve a state.
Me too. I was a believer in the two-state solution, like all dumb Western people. I thought, oh, well, let's just do a two-state solution.
Now I understand that there actually is two states there. Jordan is the Arab state. And they were supposed to absorb the West Bank and Gaza, in 1948.
Yeah.
But the Arab nationalists wanted the whole freaking piece of pie.
Exactly.
They wanted the whole freaking pie.
And that's why the two-state solution has never worked. Every attempt since 1947, every time it's rejected by the Arabs. They don't want it. They want a one-state solution with the Jews gone.
Well, I don't want to say the Arabs anymore because some like the countries that invaded Israel in 1948, they've made peace.
True.
Egypt, peace. Jordan, they've made peace, and the Gulf states are being cool with them. It's just the jihadists,
right?
And they're all they're all part of this Husseinite Nazi religion. So part of their philosophy is that we realize that we're never going to get rid of Israel as long as there are Arab states that are willing to make peace with them. And the only way we're going to stop them from making peace with them is to turn them into an Islamic country. So that's the whole reason why the jihadists are always trying to overthrow governments.
That's right.
But
al-Husseini himself ordered several assassinations. I think it was King Abdullah of Jordan in 1951.
Yeah.
He was assassinated right outside Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, I think it was, by a Palestinian. Shot him dead on the orders of al-Husseini. And there was never any justice. Just to kind of tie up the story about Amin al-Husseini, he was protected after the war. He eventually settled in Beirut, I believe, Lebanon. And it was there that he mentored a young man, his cousin, named Yasser Arafat. And the PLO and Fatah was born out of the Hussein cult. I call it a cult. The Husseinites, whatever you want to call them. But Yasser Arafat, he learned everything that he knew from the Grand Mufti, was literally mentored at his feet. And that takes us to that very interesting point in the Cold War when alliances in the Middle East shifted. Like you said earlier, originally it was the Soviet Union that strongly supported Israel in 1948. And then that changed during the Cold War when Israel and the United States came closer together, which then forced the Soviets to forge an alliance with their former enemies, the Arabs, the Palestinians who had fought against them with Hitler in World War II. Then they end up climbing into bed with them.
Well, I kind of disagree in the order of that. I don't think that the Soviets turned their backs on Israel after they formed an alliance with the United States. The Soviet Union turned their backs on Israel first over the Suez Canal because they saw what Egypt was doing to take that Suez Canal away from that Western company as something that was going to lead to a revolution in the Middle East where the European countries were going to learn, they're the dependent people for for the oil, etc., etc. So they were the ones who turned their backs on Israel first, and that is what turned Israel toward the United States.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.